It was a fog-soaked morning in rural Wyoming when local authorities received a chilling anonymous tip. There are bodies at the redemption fields. Lots of them. No name, no trace, just coordinates. Deputy Carla Mason was the first on the scene. Her cruiser cut through the mist, tires crunching against gravel, as she pulled up to the rusted gate of the so-called redemption fields, a secluded religious commune hidden deep in the backcountry. For years, locals whispered about the strange people who lived behind that gate. Now it was silent, completely silent. What they found inside would horrify the nation. Rows of bodies, dozens, men, women, children, all laid out neatly, dressed in ceremonial robes. Eyes closed, arms crossed across their chests like they were waiting for something divine. But there was no divinity here, only death. The stench of tragedy hung heavy. No signs of struggle, no obvious wounds, just eerie peace, as if they had willingly marched to the edge of existence. And in the center of it all, a chair, empty. Where was the man who had led them? Where was Ezekiel Sloan? 10 years before the massacre, Ezekiel Sloan was just a name on a podcast episode about failed televangelists. He'd been disgraced, excommunicated from a fringe religious broadcasting network for blasphemous interpretations of Scripture. But while others saw insanity, some saw enlightenment. Ezekiel reemerged a year later, bearded, wild-eyed, and rebranded. He now called himself the Shepherd of Light. His followers, the chosen fold. He preached not from churches, but in rented barns and empty fields. He promised salvation through sacrifice, clarity through obedience. He twisted biblical prophecy with doomsday visions. The world was ending, he said, and when it did, only his followers would be spared if they surrendered everything. Everything. Money, family, identity, even free will. They weren't mad. They were desperate. Single mothers trying to escape abuse. Teen runaways. Veterans suffering PTSD. Recovering addicts. Lonely retirees. All drawn to the same flame, Ezekiel's promises of peace and purpose. He didn't just preach to them, he studied them. He knew exactly what they needed to hear. The world forgot you, he'd say, but I haven't. I see your soul, and I can save it. To outsiders, it looked like charity. But inside the compound, it was psychological warfare. New initiates to the redemption fields underwent what Ezekiel called the unshackling. No outside contact, no personal possessions, no mirrors, no clocks, no names. You were reborn, given a new identity, a new family. You no longer thought, you obeyed. One defector later described it as dying while still breathing. Every moment was controlled, meals, prayers, work shifts. If you questioned Ezekiel, you were assigned spiritual isolation, locked in a dark cellar for days. No food. No water, just an audio loop of Ezekiel's voice repeating, "Pain is the gate to light." 2 months before the massacre, a freelance journalist named Kendra Walsh visited redemption fields under the guise of writing about rural spiritual movements. She was calm, smart, and suspicious. In her notebook, later found stashed behind a false panel in her abandoned car, she wrote, "They smile too much. The silence isn't peaceful. It's rehearsed." One man cried during prayer. They dragged him out and no one flinched. This place is dying. She never published her article. She never made it home. Her disappearance was reported, but with no concrete evidence of a crime, no search was conducted. Not until the bodies were found. Recovered recordings from a hidden tape player, later confirmed to have been planted by Kendra Walsh, revealed the final sermon Ezekiel gave to his followers the night before the massacre. His voice was calm, hypnotic, apocalyptic. The world outside is ash. You are the seed. To rise, you must first fall. Fire is our baptism. Death is our door. When you sleep, you will awaken, not here, but there. In the kingdom. He convinced them that salvation meant death. That only by shedding the physical could they reach the eternal. That their faith would carry them beyond the mortal coil. Together. The anonymous tip that led authorities to the compound came from a man named Benjamin Creel, Ezekiel's former right hand. In a handwritten letter, he wrote, I couldn't stop him, but I couldn't follow him either. They're all dead. And he planned it. Every word, every prayer, every sermon. It wasn't faith. It was murder. And I helped. Benjamin was later found in a motel room, dead by apparent overdose. Beside him was Ezekiel's journal, filled with deranged scribblings, drawings of burning angels, countdowns, and pages that simply read, "They trust me, even in death." For weeks, investigators searched the compound. Finally, behind the pulpit in the main chapel, they found it, a false floorboard. Beneath it, a narrow tunnel carved into the earth. It stretched for nearly a mile through limestone and clay. At the end, an unmarked van, a map, a change of clothes, passports. He had planned his escape months in advance. While his followers prayed, he ran. Ezekiel Sloan became the most wanted man in America. Interpol got involved. False sightings flooded in from Canada, Mexico, even South America. But no arrests, no trace, until a grainy surveillance video emerged, showing a man matching his description boarding a fishing vessel off the coast of Louisiana, alone and smiling. 2 years later, in a shack deep in the swamps of the Amazon, Ezekiel Sloan was found dead, poisoned. Beside his body, a tape recorder. On it, his final words, "I was wrong, but they believed in me, and that belief was more powerful than truth. I made them gods. Who made me God? Was it suicide or revenge?" No one claimed responsibility. No one claimed his body. He was buried in an unmarked grave. But the damage lived on. They were called the Strays. 3 former cult members who left redemption fields in the months leading up to the massacre. Each one broken, gaunt, and terrified of being found. For years, they said nothing, until the discovery of the bodies. Only then did they speak. One woman, only identified as Ruth, described watching her best friend drink what Ezekiel called the elixir of ascension. Minutes later, she collapsed. He told us not to grieve. He said her soul had been accepted, that death was her reward for unwavering faith. And we believed him. God help me, I believed him. Her voice cracked. Her eyes stared somewhere far away. I was supposed to drink next. Among the recovered evidence was a spiral notebook filled with drawings. It belonged to a young boy just 8 years old. Every page was filled with the same thing. Angels. Some weeping, some burning. One page, scrawled in red crayon, simply read, "He says I will fly if I sleep. I don't want to sleep." The boy's body was later identified, one of the youngest victims found near the chapel altar, curled beside his mother. His drawings would become a symbol of the tragedy, and a haunting reminder of innocence lost. After Kendra Walsh's tapes went public, the world was captivated by the journalist who had nearly exposed it all. Her voice, clear, skeptical, and brave, echoed through the recordings. "This isn't a church. It's a trap. And he's the spider." But something else emerged. An email Kendra had drafted but never sent. Subject, "If I disappear." In it, she wrote about strange men watching her motel, her car being moved without explanation, and the overwhelming sense that someone inside the cult knew her real identity. "I think Ezekiel's watching me through someone else's eyes." She signed off with one final line, "If I don't make it out, tell the world what happened here." Authorities uncovered a hidden cellar beneath Ezekiel's personal quarters. Chains bolted to the walls, a stained mattress, a camera mounted in a corner, and dozens of handwritten confessions from cult members, begging forgiveness for private thoughts, dreams, even doubts. Each letter ended the same way. "I pledge my mind. I pledge my blood. I am yours." Forensic experts found fingernail scratches in the stone walls. Deep, desperate. This was the pit where those who resisted were remade, or erased. Ezekiel Sloan had 17 spiritual brides. Only 3 survived. They lived in a remote cabin 30 miles from the main compound. Isolated, pregnant, guarded. Each woman was under 25. Each had been promised they were carrying the anointed seed, a child destined to inherit the earth after the cleansing. One survivor, Naomi, finally spoke. He said we were vessels, not people, just doors he'd chosen to walk through. She miscarried 2 weeks before the massacre. The others gave birth. The fate of those children remains under investigation. Local authorities had received 6 separate reports about redemption fields in the 2 years before the mass deaths. Each one dismissed. Freedom of religion, they said. One caller reported screams at night. Another claimed to see people digging what looked like mass graves. No warrants were ever issued. No inspections. No one wanted to be the person who violated religious liberty. And so the law waited. And while they waited, 56 people died. Investigators recovered Ezekiel's doctrine, a 300-page manifesto distributed to inner circle members only. It was apocalyptic, messianic, delusional, and meticulously organized. In it, he detailed the process of unmooring the soul from the flesh, described mass death as a divine exodus, and outlined logistical protocols for food rations, body disposal, and escape routes. It wasn't chaotic. It was planned to the minute. If they die with doubt, they are lost. If they die with faith, they will lead the new world. This wasn't suicide. This was engineered martyrdom. According to census data, redemption fields housed 63 people, but only 56 bodies were recovered. 7 were unaccounted for. 6 of them were children. A nationwide Amber Alert was issued, but there were no sightings, no leads. Only one trace. A truck stop camera that showed a woman, one of Ezekiel's brides, holding the hand of a toddler as they boarded a bus going south. They never reached their destination. Some believe Ezekiel entrusted certain children to carriers before the final ceremony, to preserve the purest of his seed. No one knows where they are now. The state of Wyoming held a public inquiry. There was no Ezekiel to prosecute, but there were enablers, 3 lieutenants, 2 former county officials, 1 financial backer. All were charged with conspiracy, obstruction, or aiding criminal activity. The most shocking testimony came from Eleanor Burns, Ezekiel's financial advisor. I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew what he could do, and I still gave him everything he needed. When asked why, she replied, "Because he made me believe he was God." In the years since, the land where redemption fields once stood has been left untouched. Nature is reclaiming it. The chapel burned in a lightning strike. The fields overgrown. No monument, no sign, just empty soil and bad memory. But for those who survived or escaped, the scars run deeper. Some started support groups. Others disappeared again into anonymity. And still, some fear Ezekiel's teachings live on in hidden places. Fragments of belief clung to by those still searching for salvation. The cult is dead, but the idea is not. Weeks after the inquiry began, an unmarked envelope arrived at a local news station. Inside was a flash drive. The footage was grainy, but the voice was unmistakable. Ezekiel Sloan. He was alive when it was filmed. By the time they find this, I will be beyond reach. But I did not die. Death is for the faithless. I walked through the fire, and I was not burned. Experts authenticated the voice, but the location, unknown. Authorities launched an international manhunt. But Ezekiel had vanished, leaving behind the chilling possibility that his final sermon was only the beginning. Federal investigators uncovered a hidden server once used by the cult's inner circle. Inside were thousands of documents labeled rebirth candidates. They weren't cult members. They were targets, people who had been observed, profiled, and categorized as vulnerable to indoctrination: single mothers, ex-addicts, veterans, the mentally ill. One folder was marked, Phase 2, Seeds of Eden. It included coordinates, maps, lease agreements, construction plans for a new compound in Oregon. The blueprints were chillingly familiar. He was just the numbers guy, but his books told a different story. Ezekiel's former accountant, Thomas Pell, kept secret records of off-the-books cash movements. Over $3.4 million funneled through shell companies. The money came from crypto wallets, anonymous donors, and even laundered charitable foundations. And most of it didn't go to redemption fields. It went offshore, to Panama, the Caymans, Malta, It was a trail of money that hinted at something bigger than a single cult. It was an operation. April Calloway, 19 years old, straight-A student, headed to Northwestern on scholarship. Until she disappeared. She was found among the dead, dressed in ceremonial white, a blue ribbon tied around her wrist. Her parents had reported her missing 18 months earlier. No leads, no clues. Until now, the last thing she posted on social media was a quote. "Sometimes you have to lose the world to find your place in it." Investigators believe she was lured by a fake online wellness retreat run by one of Ezekiel's lieutenants. She never knew what she was walking into. A drone hobbyist in New Mexico captured footage of a gathering in the desert. A bonfire, a speaker, dozens of figures in white. The speaker's face was obscured, but the audio was clear. "We were not defeated. We were refined. From ashes we rise, and the shepherd will return." When agents arrived days later, the camp was gone. All that remained was a banner, scorched by the sun. Salvation is coming. It wasn't over. It was spreading. Psychologists studying survivor testimony uncovered a horrifying pattern. Ezekiel used sleep deprivation, fasting, forced confessions, and shame cycles to systematically destroy a person's sense of self, then rebuild it in his image. He called it the refiner's process. Victims experienced hallucinations, paranoia, complete dependency. One survivor, after weeks of therapy, finally spoke. "He didn't brainwash me. He erased me." Her therapist confirmed signs of extreme psychological conditioning, the kind often seen in prisoners of war. Except this wasn't war. It was worship. A recovered VHS tape showed Ezekiel leading children in song. Their voices were soft, robotic, the lyrics disturbing. "He is the way, the pain, the flame. We walk to death in heaven's name." The footage was dated 6 months before the deaths. A music expert noted irregular pauses in the children's rhythm, signs they were terrified, following instructions under threat. When asked where the video came from, the agent who found it said, "It was left on my windshield. No note, just a post-it. They are not all dead." Her name was Marta Rios, a former cult enforcer turned whistleblower. She was Ezekiel's most trusted guardian, and the first to try to kill him. On the night of the mass ceremony, she slipped a sedative into his wine, but someone tipped him off. Instead, he drank nothing, and Marta vanished, presumed dead in the fire, until she walked into a consulate in Guatemala with burns across half her body and a box of documents labeled Eden Protocol. She had survived, and she was ready to burn everything down. Marta's files revealed the terrifying final plan. Eden Protocol was Ezekiel's blueprint for a global expansion, a decentralized network of cells using religion, wellness, and self-help as recruitment fronts. Each cell was trained to act independently, to go quiet when needed, to wait. His goal wasn't just death. It was resurrection, not of bodies but of ideology. Burn the house, plant the seeds, and wait for spring. It wasn't over. It was hibernating. Inside Marta's documents was one last revelation. Dozens of cult members had infiltrated public roles, therapists, teachers, corrections officers, even police. They were watchers, recorders, recruiters. Some had families. Some had assumed new identities. But all reported back to one signal phrase: the shepherd calls. The fear now isn't just that Ezekiel is still alive. The fear is he's watching, waiting, and his flock is still out there. A decade after the Redemption Fields massacre, a small-town ER in rural Montana admitted a burn victim. Middle-aged, silent, no ID. He called himself John Shepherd. A young nurse, reviewing intake forms, paused at his face. It was the eyes. She'd seen them before on a documentary. On wanted posters, the FBI raced to the scene. But the man had vanished. Left behind was a single word etched into the mirror in blood-red soap. Judged. DNA confirmed what agents feared. The blood belonged to Ezekiel Sloan. But if he was bleeding, he was also afraid. The break came not from a clue, but from a betrayal. An anonymous tip led agents to a mountain monastery in northern Chile, funded by a silent American investor. Inside was a high-security bunker, underground, concrete reinforced, and in a room padded with scripture-lined walls, cameras found him. Ezekiel Sloan, barely alive, paranoid, surrounded by guards who called him the Anointed. But one of them had switched sides. His inner circle had been infiltrated by Marta Rios all along. She had waited 8 years, and when the signal came, she activated a silent beacon. The shepherd falls tonight. The courtroom was sealed. Ezekiel Sloan stood pale and gaunt before a jury of the people he'd once condemned to hell. The charges: 94 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 73 counts of negligent homicide, racketeering, psychological torture, child endangerment, and mass murder in the first degree. As survivors took the stand one by one, Ezekiel remained silent, until the judge asked if he had any final words. He whispered, "You can kill the shepherd, but the sheep will remember." The judge replied without hesitation, "This court doesn't sentence you to death, Mr. Sloan. We sentence you to obscurity." He was remanded to a maximum security federal prison under 24-hour surveillance. No followers, no sermons, no legacy. The cult was officially dismantled. Every cell identified, every leader prosecuted. And for the first time in decades, the victims' families, like April Calloway's parents, could finally say a name without trembling: justice. Stay tuned for more chilling cases on Cold Case Chronicles, where the truth is always darker than fiction. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to Cold Case Chronicles. We dive deeper into the most chilling, unsolved mysteries, and together, we uncover what was left behind. Like, share, and leave a comment below. We want to hear your thoughts. Stay vigilant. Stay curious. The truth never rests.